Sawabona, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, theys and thems, people of all kinds, spirits, all in one place, taking the time to breathe, to take the moment, to witness the moment, to honor the moment. I say these things with breath, with purpose, and with passion because I believe today's guest has all these things, a true understanding of what every single one of these things means. Now, I had this big plan. My plan was to come on and say, our guest today is a transformational coach, a spiritual mentor, a breathwork facilitator, a platinum music producer, a multi-instrumentalist, a husband, and a father. But it felt still too small for all the things I got to experience when I did a breathworks class with him and the great and legendary Michael Cherno. Thank you, Michael, for the opportunity. I felt it didn't connect the things that I felt during those moments. I think our guest, Michael Gazzo, bridges the worlds of healing and artistry as a transformational coach and multi-talented creator. That if you read his newsletters, you pick up on his unique journey from platinum music producer and multi-instrumentalist to a spiritual mentor and breathwork facilitator. That brings a distinctive rhythm to his healing practice. That at the heart of his work, at least from what I've seen as an outside observer, there is more of a guide than anything else. Someone that helps you with powerful transformation experiences. That's, again, what I went through, and how his approach was completely different to other breathworks I did. That there was almost the precision of a producer as he does it, as he takes you through it. He's almost DJing the experience of deep inner work and personal transformation. And I think as verbose as I've been in explaining what his professional practice is, I think he will probably do a better job of explaining it through the next 40 minutes. So without further ado, I welcome Michael Gazzo to The Rich Life Recipe.
Happy to be here, and thank you for such an incredible introduction. Really was. Happy to be here and be speaking to you guys.
Awesome. We're excited to see you.
My co-host, that fantastic voice breaking away there in the background, is Alicia Shiro. Alicia joins us all the way from the city so nice they named it twice.
Oh yeah, today has been a day, and it doesn't surprise me that you are our guest today because I am in much need of a mental unblocking, as they say. So please, DJ away.
Well, I'm here to help in any way I can, and it's always exciting to be able to be given the opportunity to speak about my journey, the work that I've been involved in, and how transformative it's been just for myself, my family, my ecology around me, and even in the communities that we've built. So in any way I can support you through this conversation or some frameworks that might kind of loosen some, stuck things in the mind or the body, I'm here for it. So
I love that. And I think we are definitely going to try that in the time that we have together. But I want to start on some stuff that I know I took notes of when I was doing my research on you. Like before we had the conversation that I was lucky enough or blessed enough to find myself in a position to do.
Yeah.
And that was this idea of transitioning from DJ in the nightlife industry to becoming a healer and a breathwork facilitator. What sparked that transformation in your life?
We might need more than 45 minutes for that one. I mean, to chunk it all down or maybe chunk it up into a bigger picture, I fell in love with music at an early age. It was like my first love, honestly. 3 years old, banging on pots and pans, singing around the dinner table, asking for $1. Like I was a hustler at 3 years old. And but it was the musical world was so fascinating to me, first and foremost as a listener, and pretty much immediately as a performer, or at least as a practicer of these different instruments. And I was actually just talking to a close brother of mine last night. He had no idea I've been music producing, just like in a computer in a DAW for 24 years.
Wow.
And so, or 22 years rather. So it's been a long journey. And so how I kind of like got immersed into the world of creativity was a means for me to almost find an outlet for the things that I had been going through, as any adolescence does, the growing pains of becoming a teenager, and, moving away, and then having parents who separated through college. There's a lot of stuff. And I could go into this stuff for a long time, but there was things that were obvious that were happening, and then a lot of things that were happening behind the scenes in my home, internally within my own being, and what I was experiencing with life. And so music was that first, like, I'm just going to put all of myself into something, which was awesome. It was beautiful. It was amazing. Now, fast forward, I really started to recognize that, I found success through the music industry, got signed to many different labels, my first major label back in 2015, and had a beautiful journey with them, and got to play shows all around the world, like really lived the life, red carpet events, like working with A-list artists, all this stuff. And I just kept feeling this void. I kept feeling this emptiness. And each time I would hit a goal, I'd be like, all right, well, this wasn't big enough. And that's like everyone on the planet, right? We go after this material level of success without really listening to ourselves and asking, like, well, why do I want this? Other than the money, needs, and resources that it will come with, like, what is the essence of the reason I'm going after this? And so all that to be said, I kind of noticed after almost a decade in the industry that I was unhappy. I had became robotic in how I made music. I was unhealthy, really unhealthy, drinking, drugs, partying all the time, late nights, as you would imagine. And, it's like easy to be in the industry, and everybody's like, well, that's what you do. And no one's like, well, that's not good for you. Like, so,
Yeah.
being in the industry in that way, once I realized that the one thing that I had so heavily identified myself with wasn't all of who I was, that's where things started to crack. And when I say crack, I mean in a good way. Back in 2018, it was like 2017, 2018 was really like the catalyst, I would say, for me. And the catalyst was, ironically, a breakup. Most people actually have similar experiences where they go through some level of grief that is overwhelming, whether it's losing someone that they love, or a relationship, or, friends change, whatever it is. So I had that, and it wasn't really the breakup, like the information of the breakup itself. I just finally sat there and said, I haven't dealt with a single thing. I haven't slowed down ever. And I am overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. I need to do something differently. And that was the beginning of me starting to piece together the larger, deeper story of who I was, or more so, peel back who I thought I was. Because again, you identify so deeply in anything, there's a deconstruction that happens when you figure out you're more than just that one thing. And so it wasn't easy. And I certainly made a lot of mistakes the first 2 years. I was like in and out of meditation retreats like it was my drug. I was like, I would get my fix, I'd feel all high and mighty and righteous, and then I'd try to keep it for like as long as I could. And the moment I would drop into old behavior, I'd go back. And it was something, again, even in that mechanism, something that was missing. And so how it kind of really sort of like metastasized, or amplified in my life, was a few years later, really starting to work with shadow information in the unconscious mind, starting to work with, beautiful plant medicines and traditional ceremonies, like really, really reverent spaces, and traversing the world of the breath, which I could talk forever about, and how impactful it was in my life. And multiple trainings, multiple retreats, darkness caves, like you name it. I'm like, oh, I haven't done it. Throw me in there. Let's see what's there. And so it was like, to a long-winded way of answering that, like, it was really like most people recognizing that, one, I had run away from myself for a long time. I didn't know how to deal with what I went through. And not to mention, I didn't want to. A flashy life is a lot easier to pretend to be happy in than dealing with what's underneath. And so I did that as long as I could. And I'm so grateful that I had that moment of a breakup that did it, instead of like a hospitalization, or, something even worse, right?
Mm.
That I wholeheartedly, and I say this very transparently and raw and vulnerably, I would not be here if I hadn't changed. I would have, I would be dead. In one way or another, I wouldn't be here. And so, as you would imagine, the work itself, beyond its spiritual, purpose-driven, and meaningful space in the world, for me, it's personal on how impactful this journey has been in changing and transforming my life. And all I want to do is just share it with people that are interested.
I love
So,
that.
yeah,
I think, your story resonates, especially to Alicia and I, because we're both from that world. Alicia's still in that world. She does the red carpet events. She does these big events.
yeah,
That's her bread and butter. Did events for a decade. I ran a
yeah,
club and a members club and a restaurant for 5 solid straight years
yeah.
before my personal burnout and breakthrough. But I'd love to sort of move this slightly, only because I thought this was so interesting when I was doing homework on you.
Sure.
You described attending your first 10-day silent meditation retreat in Hong Kong after, 2 weeks of using Headspace. What made you take such a bold leap into intensive meditation? Or is this, like you said, because you were just like a junkie on wellness and you just thought, okay, this is
Yeah.
the heroin that I need?
All of the above. And I can answer it by saying, the repurposed addictive energy kind of became for a long time like my spiritual conquest. So that was there.
Mm.
There was a righteousness, though, and I mean righteousness as in like a lot of things shifted as a result of that energy. And when I realized that the energy was because there was a belief system in me that I wasn't good enough and I needed to prove my worth, it didn't change whether it was music or spirituality. I was like, all right, I'm going to go the hardest you possibly could go with being the most spiritual man ever. And there was still like a posturing, there was still like a wearing of like a role or a mask. But yeah, it was so really it was my buddy Marco Hansel. He's a rock star, and he had a company called Speaker, an influencer marketing company that did really well. And then he kind of, in a similar way, like plunged himself into personal growth and spiritual development. And so I was living in a place in LA. We had a couple people in and out. It was like a 4-bedroom spot, little like a 4-story loft, really nice. And my buddy was on tour, so he wanted to rent out his room for a couple months, and he had this friend Marco. So Marco knocks on the door. I open the door, and this was like 2 months before I left, right? So I open the door, and this dude is like, he's like glowing like an angel. He's full of life. His eyes are like so present. And immediately, the first thing I think in my head is like, what drug are you on? I'm like,
Yeah.
what are you doing right now that is making you feel that way? Which is the programming, right? Like you have to do something to feel
Mhm.
something.
Mhm.
So, he was like, I'm on meditation, bro. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? He's like, I just got back from Thailand, 7 days in silence, and my mind is blown. And we're talking about it. And that was the seed. It wasn't fully fruit. It didn't fully fruit for a few, maybe a month later or so. Um, I definitely used a little bit of liquid courage before I booked my trip across the world to sit in silence for 10 days. But needless to say, around that time, I'd kind of started to dip my toe in some alternative practices because, you know, I realized like I needed to add new energy into my life, or else I was scared. I was not coping well with the changes, but more importantly, all the other stuff that was bubbling up. Like, hey, you haven't ever dealt with this or that, and so yeah, that's what like propelled me to go from like one extreme to another, which was, again, I think the after effect of like going back and like starting to go, 2 feet into all these spiritual frameworks and all that, was partially as a desire to keep going with this work, and then also a little bit of that like addictive role
Mm.
playing energy, which, it was subtle, for me at least, and what I was aware of in the beginning. Um, but the going from like a couple minutes a day to 10 hours a day was pure faith, man. It was just like pure faith. I was like, I see whatever this guy's got going on, and I just met him, but I trust him. I don't know why. It's wild. And I'm going to go to Hong Kong. I've never been there. I don't speak any other language than English, which is perfect because I don't want to run into a single person. And I'm just going to I'm going to see what happens. And it was profound. It was really profound. And even as profound as it was very hard to integrate, which is, partially why I'm a transformational coach now and helping people integrate these magnificently big experiences and realizations into actual things in their life. Like, what does that mean for you on a day-to-day basis with your micro and macro choices? So yeah, it was it was a big go hard, go home type of thing. And those that have known me from my old life would be like, oh, that sounds exactly like Mike. It's like, it just, oh, you like watched a video of somebody in a cave and now you're going next month. It's like, I spare no expense when it comes to personal growth and development, and also just things that interest me,
I love that.
So yeah.
That's incredible. I've got to say, sorry, Alicia, I know you. I'm going to be 3 seconds. I did 5 days in Thailand. I didn't speak to a single person, and then I went to go see this guy Nick Gray that I'm friends with on the internet. You message each other, you share a meme, maybe you comment to the tweets, whatever.
Sure.
And and this is what I wanted to ask you. When I met him, I did not stop speaking for 40 minutes straight. I to this day, I swear he faked having a stomach ache and said, "Nice meeting you," and then ran out to the toilet. And I never saw him again. So Nick, if you're listening, again, I know I've already apologized. I'm sorry. I had spoken to no one. What was the first interaction? Did you get to the airport and they were like, "Can I have your passport?" And you were like, "Hey, hi, how you doing? Where you been? What you up to? How long have you been working?" What was that?
Yeah, the barrier to entry was interesting. I purposefully planned to stay in Hong Kong for a few extra days, so I had some integration space. I luckily had a friend who just so happened to have moved there like 6 months ago, so I stayed at his apartment. He was traveling, and then another friend who like was there for business. So I had some people there that I didn't realize were just in the vicinity of Hong Kong, Singapore, like that whole pocket. When I first, all of the meditation retreats that I've been on, and I've been on 5 of those, right? I have called everyone I love and just like dropped into a space of appreciation and all that, like gratitude and like just connection. And then I talk, and then in the beginning would talk about my experience immediately. And just like, this happened and this happened. And like, what I've noticed over these years is that keeping things sacred is part of the work. Doesn't mean that you have to close yourself off. You could say a lot. I always say to my clients with the breakthrough session, which is a 2-day deep dive into an area of life, you can say a lot without saying much. A partner asks, how was it? It was super deep. A lot of things came up from my past. I uncovered a lot and I'm still integrating. Thank you for asking. That has so much weight without, you didn't say anything. You literally didn't say much, but there's something about that that's reverent. And so for me, in the beginning, I definitely made that, I don't know, like it's called a mistake, but like definitely that like initiatory, like I want to tell everybody. I was like Vipassana spokesperson. I'd like be at a gas station, like in New Jersey, pumping my gas, be like, you ever heard of Vipassana? It would really help with your anger. It's like, I was talking to my parents about it, my like relatives that like think meditation is like a sacrilegious act. Like, I'm like, no, this is different. It's non-denominational. You could go there as a Christian, blah, blah, blah. Like, and so that energy was there for sure. But over the years and through the guidance of amazing mentors and strong brothers of mine about learning what communication boundaries are about and how to, recognize when you're in process of something versus like able to share about something is definitely has been a really important tool for me, especially with my wife, which like, she's a mother, 15-month-old, like she just doesn't have space to like listen to my shit all day, and it's not her role either. It's not her position. It's not her responsibility to do that. Our intimacy and our connection is based off of how we can show up for each other, of course, but I got to take care of my side of the street too. And so all that to be said, yeah, man, I was like a chatterbox. Every second I'd be in a music session 2 months later and I'd be like, you guys ever meditate? I was like that quintessential spiritual guy, just like got a bunch of crystals, a bunch of Buddhas in my room. It's like went from one extreme to the other extreme. But it served a purpose. I think I introduced a lot of people to some cool things, but it was funny. I was definitely talking my ear off in there.
I love that. Alicia, apologies.
No worries. I mean, my head is spinning from all the great information that you've released into our podcast sphere. I just think it's amazing that you made that journey from where you were to where you are now. So my first question is, how long did that take time-wise?
Great question. Yeah. So the work is compounding and it also gets more subtle. And what I mean by that is when I think you first start to do any level of therapeutical anything, whether it is self-reflective like meditation or maybe perhaps more guided like therapy where you're getting questions and, a little bit of guidance there. It's like once you start hitting the well of stuff, it's like, poof, poof, poof,
Right.
and you're like, what's this? Oh my God. And like your perception of your own world shifts so drastically. And, that's like sexy and fun. And like, you feel like you're about to become enlightened in a week. And like the whole mechanism that's there is beautiful. And then things, they don't slow down. They just get more fine tuned. And so with that though, because it's almost like if you were to change a strand of DNA, fundamentally, everything would change in the body, right? So when I say it gets subtler, I also mean that it gets subtler in focus as well as depth. So when those changes happen, because I've done all this foundational work to like basically as best I can prepare my body, my being, my mind to integrate it, it isn't so destabilizing. And it does make big shifts happen in a different way. So the whole timeline on a linear way, I would say like 2 years of struggling to integrate. And then from about 5 years of steady committed work. I've never, I have not stopped.
Right. I don't think it ever ends, right? It doesn't ever
ends.
end. The journey continues because you're constantly growing and elevating.
Exactly.
And I think something else you mentioned, which I find to be very true, is that even if you're in therapy, right? Because let's face it, you can't keep moving forward in life if you've never dealt with anything that's happened in your past. You get to a point where you hit a wall. And that past will keep coming up until you address it. And then once you address it, you can finally start to move forward. You have to heal from whatever that is in order to move forward. But what I find, and those in the therapy world may get mad at me, and I actually have a very good friend who's a therapist, but I find that there's a lot of talking, maybe some helpful advice, but they do not give you the tools to change the behavior. So I always feel like there's tools needed to change the behavior. So what I did in my past, I've hired a life coach similar to some of the things that you've done. And this woman literally changed my life. She would get down to things in 2 seconds, but that wasn't the end of it. From there, she provided tools, meditation, breath work, visualization techniques, so many different things to get you unstuck from where you are to get you where you want to be. And I think whatever that is for anyone out there, it's finding what works for you. So, and I love that you're helping people make that transition, because that's where it falls apart. You go for all this therapy or enlightenment, you can attend 100 conferences. If you're not walking away with tools that can change your behavior, then you're right back where you started. And that's why Jason and I actually started this podcast, because we're trying to give people a recipe to have a more rich life.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I know I had mentioned earlier overcoming unconscious blocks, because if you've never done any of this hard work, and it is hard work,
Mm-hmm.
and most people don't want to do the hard work,
Mm-hmm.
they're happy where they are, and they don't want to address the past because a lot of times it's just too hard.
Yeah.
Right. So for those people that do want to overcome this unconscious block, what are some of the, recipes, if you will, that are common health related blocks that you've seen in people? Is there a
Mm-hmm.
pattern? And what is your, I don't want to say advice, but what is your recommendation or transition or tool that you would give to them?
Yeah. Well, I'd love to comment on what you said and then kind of segue into the answer. So first and foremost, I also I agree with the therapy model. I also know some really badass therapists that have tools. So I think it's situational.
Correct.
Most therapists that I've at least encountered via either myself or through clients I've worked with that have had a therapist for 7 years kind of say the same thing. They've been talking about the same stuff for a while, and there's been beautiful things that have come from that, but not the type of results they're looking for. So I think it depends on the therapist. One of my mentors has been in this space of transformation for 22 years. She's a clinical therapist, and she does breakthrough sessions and breath work, and she's got a lot of tools. She does function as a coach, but she also has therapy clients. So she can arm people with frameworks, tools, and things that will be supportive for them in their integration process. Because the reality of our life is that what really shows up are micro choices. Rarely are they big choices. We do have big choices, but they're like what? 30, 40 over a life. Everything else is micro. And guess what? The micro fractals into the macro, just like the macro fractals into the micro. So when we're not given ways to integrate in between sessions, people are just lost. They're like, I felt great, and then I felt terrible for the whole week, or I got triggered, etc. What do I do with that? So to answer the question about if you're starting your journey, or even if you're a little bit in and maybe you're going to therapy, one of the best ways, first and foremost, is to just educate yourself a little bit on what the shadow is. Just a little bit. There's an amazing book by one of my mentors and my mentor's mentor, Dr. Matt, Integrate the Shadow, Master Your Path, 120 pages, straightforward. What is the shadow? What is the anima? What is the animus? And what I describe and what they describe in the book as the shadow is the distance between who you are and who you want to be. So the archetype of, oh, I would love to be more kind, as an example, right? So then where you are in relation to that, somewhere in between is a belief of either I'm not kind or I'm not enough or whatever it is. It's like, it's hard to put together a recipe of for everyone in regard to the shadow and the unconscious material, but the methodology to get there is definitely similar. So one of those ways, very easily, is breath work. Breath work doesn't necessarily have like a pinpointed surgical focus, because when you do breath work, as you both have experienced, what happens. It's like a medicine ceremony. You take a little bit of a cup of ayahuasca, you best believe you're going wherever you're meant to. You're not like, oh, I'm going to give my ticket back and get out of it. You're not going to. The beautiful thing about breath work is at least you have autonomy and sovereignty to slow the breath down or stop if it feels too intense. That's why I love that as an introductory practice for people that feel a little bit disconnected to that unconscious information. Another way is be very aware of your body and its sensations, because any sensation in the body is a precursor to an emotion. And any sensation, especially your nervous system, is an indicator of your the nervous system is a byproduct of the code of your unconscious mind. Because guess what powers all that? Your unconscious mind. So when you work with sensations, you do body work, you do anything that's a somatic practice, it'll be really useful for you. And that's more, and in the breathwork space, the reason I love it is, so you're hitting the mark on somatic. You're also reaching into the emotional body, because emotions come up through those sensations. You also obviously have the mental, which is the thoughts, the beliefs, anything that's in the mind. And then sometimes, if you're lucky, you get that spiritual, energetic component, out-of-body experiences, seeing into the future, reliving the past, kind of time traveling. So you can hit all 4 bodies with breath work. It just isn't very, even if you set an intention, it's not like that exact intention will be uncovered. Right. It kind of brings you where you're meant to go. Another way to work more focused within the walls of shadow work is certain type of questions. There's a thing called meta models, and meta models talks about generalizations, filters, and distortions or deletions, right? So what does that mean? We can only perceive 126 bits ish, and there's like a lot of different numbers for that, but it's a minimal amount compared to millions and millions of bits of information per second. If there's so much happening, if we were to perceive it all, I feel like our mind would explode, right? So we must generalize, we must manipulate information so that we can function. That's it. Simple as that. It's just a function of our minds. So what does that mean? It means that how you're doing it makes a big freaking difference, right? You go to one gas attendant. I don't know why I'm in a gas attendant like thing, but you go to one gas attendant and they're like kind of rude. You go to the next one and they're a bit angry. And now you go to the third one. Before they even come out, they're all assholes. You generalize. How many times have you been out with people and you got 7 different recollections of the night, whether or not you drank? Whether or not you drank, something happens and you got like, I didn't know that happened. Deletion. And then filter is almost like a version of deletion. Distortion is sometimes we manipulate information to make it easier for us to deal with it, right? So like somebody has kind of a history of emotional abuse as a kid. They might distort that in a way that says, well, I was wrong, to make them be able to deal with the fact that someone just screamed at them as a kid, right? That's kind of a deeper way to look at a distortion. But either way, meta models comes with series of questions. I have a worksheet too that anyone can reach out and I'll send it to them, that deconstructs through linguistics, through questions on identifying what those are for you. And that's a great way to start to peel the onion back on the surface and get to know what your beliefs are about how you're projecting that into the world and how you're perceiving yourself. The last way I'll say, I was just on a coaching call like right before this, and I was actually talking to my sister. She joined my group program, which I'm super stoked about. And anyway, anything that you judge and perceive in another person that is specifically judgment, but if you have any reactivity to anything outside of yourself that is over the top or unwarranted, it is your own self-belief that's in the way. So it doesn't mean that exactly what you believe about them is exactly what you believe about yourself. But if you sit with it, sit with your body, sit in a meditation, ask your unconscious mind is a great way to work with it, or answer those questions, all of the above, do some breath work. I mean, it's really a hogwash of stuff together. You will uncover something. And that's a great way to work with the belief systems, and the deeper work is just recognizing how you view the world, because that is a window into how you view yourself.
I love that. And it's so true. And I've actually done that myself. I'll give one example just so listeners can kind of understand a little bit more about what that belief system might look like, right? So I hate being told what to do. Whether it's
join the club
in business or whether it's, whatever it is, it just always rubs me the wrong way. And I typically react very quickly from 0 to 60 in a very negative way for years. And it wasn't until I started with this life coach and I become very argumentative, even if it could be about the stupidest thing. It doesn't matter. And so I would say to her, I don't understand. What am I arguing about? Like, why is it so important that it just sets me off? It's such a trigger for someone to tell me what to do. And she's like, well, who in your life was telling you what to do when you were a kid? And I was like, I was like, oh my God, my dad.
Mm-hmm.
My father and I would go at it. And I mean, go at it, because
Yeah.
he was like a drill sergeant. He was
Mm-hmm.
very tough. And he was like, you need to do this, you need to do that. Blah, blah, blah. And we would brawl a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, it was like the light bulb finally went on. And that belief system, like completely unconscious,
Mm-hmm.
and just being like, if someone tells me what to do, this is how I react.
Yeah.
And until I connected those dots and understood what it was, I could not change the behavior, because
Yeah.
it felt so real. How you just said earlier, you have to feel your body. She taught me how to feel the fire, because she
Mm-hmm.
said, what is it for you? There's different ways. And I'm like, it's like a fire.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, okay, well, when you feel that fire, you know, this is about you.
Yeah.
And so it helped me mentally be like, take a breath, slow down. This is you, because I could feel that fire. It wasn't anything that was happening in that moment.
Yeah.
It was something that's happened a million years ago.
Yeah. And it's a practice too. You know, it's like, just because you uncover even a really deep and penetrating type of belief that's there, a core belief, you still have to practice becoming more aware of how it shows up in your life. Sometimes you're lucky, and by going through some level of release or acknowledgement of that belief, it just changes your reality. And that happens, it does. And then sometimes it requires more attention and realizing when those patterns are showing up. And you know, what comes to mind for me in the same way is like, I also, as a New Jersey Italian, don't like being told what to do. Notoriously, I've definitely gotten better about it over the years with this work. And here's a great way to just unpack that too, right? If I were to have that same belief in a different way, right? I don't like being told what to do. I like to be right. And if I'm not right, I'm wrong. And what is wrong? And you just keep pulling. What does wrong mean? What does someone who's wrong mean to you? You start to look at the projection, you bring it back into self. Well, if you believe that those that are wrong outside of yourself aren't good people, then what does that say about you? And this is how we pull these threads. Now, by the way, a lot easier if someone else is guiding you or you've been trained yourself, right? And even if you've been trained, a lot of time when people are coaches, healers, even maestros and shamans and etc., it is a lot more challenging to see within yourself than it is for others. Some people are just really good at helping and seeing things in others. But if you don't couple that with your own self-work, eventually it's going to catch up karmically, and it's not going to be pretty. So, you know, my point is just because you go through trainings, wherever those are, doesn't necessarily mean that those individuals are masters at calling their own stuff out. So that's why I have like 3 coaches, you know, that's why I have strong brothers who are in this space that are like, bro, you know, let me ask you a question, you know, and we sit and we smoke our pipes on the rocking chairs and they call me out, and it's amazing, you know. And so all that to be said, there are a lot of, you know, again, there's a lot that can be learned even just through the body. If you're able and willing to take it back in, close your eyes and just feel into what's there, feel into what's activated instead of go right into defensive, or right into that reactivity verbally or whatever it looks like. And the best way is just taking a little bit of space. And the more you can communicate, hey, I'm feeling triggered. You don't say why or what. You don't go into all the details. I'm feeling triggered. I just need 10 minutes. Can I have, especially in partnerships and friendships, just need 10 minutes. I'm going to take 10 minutes and be with myself. Now, if you go and you're on Instagram, it don't take 10 minutes. It's silly. You know, go and be with yourself, however which that feels best for you. I think there are a multitude of ways. Go for a walk, change scenery, but don't do that to distract yourself from feeling. Do it to step in and feel into yourself, because the unconscious mind is on your side. It wants one of the prime directives of the unconscious mind is to keep us alive and running. That is just its function, right? So it will believe anything based off of what it's experiencing and calculate, this will either keep me alive or be really terrible for me if I do this. So that's why people play small their whole life, because they don't want to, their unconscious mind at an early age had to protect the kid, because if he went against the father or the mother, they get beat or yelled at or whatever it looks like, even if they're not picked for kickball. It could be super simple. So what does that mean? That means that later in life, we have the opportunity to reconcile those and readjust those beliefs, and basically acknowledging with the unconscious mind that, hey, this actually isn't serving me. This has protected me. Thank you for protecting me. And the unconscious mind wants you to be thriving. That's its entire purpose, is to keep you alive and keep you feeling good, feeling healthy. So when we do this work, what tends to happen is just acknowledging it can be enough. Now, sometimes you need, bells and whistles, this practice, this framework to really dislodge something that's been there for 20 years. And then sometimes you get this miraculous thing, kind of similar how you spoke about this situation with your life coach. It's just a light bulb goes off. You go, whoa, I have been living a lie. It's like, oh my gosh, I just thought I was like this. Oh my God. Anytime I hear that, I'm like, I don't think anybody's like anything. We're malleable, we're growing, we're evolving all the time. And so, yeah, those are some simple ways to work with unconscious material.
Pure gold.
It reminds me of my favorite quote by Blaise Pascal. And if I butcher it, listeners, please let me know in the comments after you've given us 5 stars, and make sure to subscribe to this podcast on Apple to iTunes. All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Let me say that again. All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. And I think that speaks a lot to what you've said about listening to yourself, your subconscious, your soul, your body. But we're ending the show, and we like to end the show with a few very important questions. The questions that relate perfectly back to what the show is all about. If I asked you, what is a rich life to you, how would you describe your version of a rich life?
Meaningful connection to one's heart and beingness and openness to grow and evolve, and meaningful connections with the people that you love and the things that you do. And knowing that the closer that you get to know yourself, the more rich and meaningful and deep are anything you do. Doesn't matter. You could be doing nothing and someone's like, that girl is deep, like you ooze it. You ooze that. So I think starting from that really deep connection, and if I were to really just be honest and chunk it all the way up, it's a deep connection with God. It's a deep connection with something, however you define that, however you label it. It's something greater than yourself that is just so happens to be within you. And when you tune and you connect with that, everything becomes meaningful. Every word, every action, even the mistakes have meaning. So that's what a rich life is for me. It's meaningful connection.
I love that. How has becoming a father changed your vision of what a rich life is?
We got to do 40, 45 podcasts here. These are great questions. In every possible way. I think that having my son, us having our son, opened up all my delusion, all my empty dreams. And what I mean by that is the things I thought I wanted based off of stuff, based off of programming, based off of a need to prove myself, however which it showed up. So when he was born, by stripping away all that I thought was important and reorienting, I always use the analogy that my son became my son, our son, where we're gravitating around providing a beautiful life. We're not hand and foot, we live our lives and we're going to, and we're really inviting him into the way we live, which I think is the best way and the most potent way to parent, instead of just doing everything the child needs, wants, etc. Really providing that base level need and the love and the nurturing and whatever roles you show up as, but being able to invite the child into your life. That being said, though, on a heart feeling level, everything I do trickles to him. Everything that I build for the future will become his one day, in one way or another, whether it's a business or it's a framework or it's a support system or a community. Doesn't matter what it is. And I want that to be the most pure it possibly could be. So if anything, it like chopped my timeline in half. It was like all the stuff I had planned for 10 years from now became next 2 years, and it's not a sense of urgency that's uncomfortable. And it doesn't feel like it's not like I have to do any of this, but definitely like reoriented and like cleaned up a lot of my disconnection with some values-based problems, belief level problems, and just a injection of like, get your shit together, Mike. Like no more playing games, because this baby needs to be fed and he needs to be happy and he needs nurturing when he's upset. And you gotta be able to hold that down in the relationship and still honor yourself, which is a whole other conversation. How do you do that? So it's been monumental to my own personal growth, development, and spiritual connection for sure.
Awesome.
I love that. And if we could ask you for one ingredient that you wish every single one of our listeners incorporates into their own rich life recipe, what would that be?
Great question. It is both the word radical accountability as one word, and honesty. When you don't even need to practice it externally right away. Like I get why people hide themselves. I hid myself for most of my life. But if you can begin to be really brutally honest and take back everything that happens in your life as not happening to you but for you, then it will be only a matter of time before you see unbelievable change happen. It might not happen right away, but that vulnerability and that rawness in your own being will only help you to show up more authentically and see more clearly everything around you. And so there's a million different tools I could, recommend to get there. It's not important to me about you need to do this tool versus that. Some people love breathwork, some people hate it. It's all good. Like it's more about the honesty, however, which you can be really brutally honest with yourself about where you are, about how you feel, and about what you want. And that's a great place to start, and transcends any tool framework, is that just raw honesty.
Amazing.
I love that. And with that honesty, we're honestly going to say thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
It's been an absolute pleasure. If you have enjoyed this, and if you want to find out more about Michael, working with him, learning from him, getting these incredible newsletters that I'm proud enough to say I subscribe to. And it's very rare that you say the words, I'm proud to subscribe to a freaking newsletter.
Oh, thank you, brother.
It's true. I really do. There's an authentism that you have. There's a grace. There's a sense of purpose and heart on every one of them that doesn't feel like an AI wrote it or a copywriter. It feels like you sat down and thought about it and wrote it out. Where do more people find out about you? How do they connect with you?
Yeah. So I'll just start with Instagram, because I answer every DM. Wow. Unless for whatever reason it goes to some crazy mailbox that I don't know about, I answer every DM, whether you're commenting on my story and I will for the rest of my life, because that platform is, giving out my personal number would be far too much. So Instagram is the closest thing to personal connection. Obviously, email, contact@michaelgazzo.com. And then if you want to learn more about some of what I do, because it's only some, michaelgazzo.com has all of the information about just some of the modalities, some of my trainings, my story, really awesome bio that my brother Anthony Love Escobar helped me wrote. He's a ghostwriter, and helps practitioners like really channel their message and their word. So he helped me with that. But yeah, there's a lot of information. There's ways to contact me there, or start to maybe go through the enrollment process for any number of my offers. But yeah, those are like I would say those are the main ways to contact me. And like I said, email is like, it's not always right away, but DMs is pretty much always right away. I'm checking. I have a social media manager that helps me not respond. I respond personally to every one of the DMs, but she helps me to remind to go on Instagram. So that's good. And so it's good. It's a good way to communicate. So however which that shows up, you want information, go to the website. You could look at my Instagram or some videos on YouTube, other podcasts. You could just Google my name, put Breathwork there, to learn more about me and my process, and information too. But those are the main ways. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I will attest to that because you answered my DM.
Yeah, I always do. I mean it.
Yep.
I love
Speaking the
that.
truth.
Alicia, do you want to say any final words before we close this off?
I am just grateful to have you on. I think this is a wonderful recipe for anyone to implement, and I'm looking forward to learning more about you.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. If you want to find out more, you've now got all the details. You have no excuse to take accountability. And lastly, if we can ask you to remember one thing other than this man's name so you can go search for it yourself, it's to remember that life happens for you and not to you. And with that, we say good night, goodbye, farewell, good morning, good afternoon. Sawabona. We see you and we thank you and we value you for seeing us.
If you love this episode, make sure to subscribe so you never miss your weekly fix. New episodes are released every Wednesday. And if you think this podcast could help someone in your life build their own rich life recipe, please make sure to share this with them too.
Hi, I'm AJS&x. You may recognize me from such podcasts as, well, the one you were just listening to. I've done a bunch of podcasts. In fact, I'm the first person ever to not sell one show, but sell two. To find over 20 ways to promote a show, to get more listeners. I've also found over 30 ways to make money from my podcast. It was at this stage that so many people came to me and asked me one question. How? How do you make money from a podcast? Which blew my mind because I kind of accepted that everyone was making money from a podcast, or why were they starting a podcast? But here's the trick. There's a formula that I found out back in 2015, and I've tested on people over and over and over again. To finally finding out that there's one recipe, just like the Rich Life recipe, a recipe to success. For the first time ever, we have a course that has everything in it. How to start a podcast, how to grow a podcast, how to promote a podcast, and how to profit from a podcast. I've done it in multiple podcast types, from lifestyle, to business, to financial, to crypto. So this is your chance. And because you've come this far, I'd love to give you a gift. If you use the coupon code LISTENER, you will get 20% off. What I'd love you to do is go to the link podcastingforbusiness.co and open the gate and meet me on the other side.
Hey everybody, my name is Di Manuel and I am the podcast host and producer of the 2% Solution podcast. And I'm so happy to be able to even say that, because had you met me just a number of weeks ago, I couldn't have told you that. But thankfully, I had the opportunity to do Jason Allen Scott's podcasting course, and it opened my eyes to all the possible strategies to not only successfully plan and strategize a podcast, but also step by step, basically set up the launch. On top of which, man, in the first 2 weeks, I was already trending in the top 100 in the health and fitness category, which I was just blown away by. But also on top of that, now I'm already starting to implement some of the monetization strategies. And in the first couple of months, my podcast is actually going to be making me money. I'm like, whoa. So if you can tell, I'm a little excited. It's just because I wasn't expecting this to happen so quickly. But, you know, if you're someone that's diligent enough to follow a step-by-step blueprint, success is right there in the formula. And I just got to say huge thank you, shout out to Jason. Without his support, mentorship, and just belief that I could do this, I just don't know if it would have been as successful. And anyway, so thank you all. And if you're on the edge thinking about, you know, committing to a course or a process or a program to learn how to be an effective podcaster, but more importantly, how to actually monetize your efforts, this is the course for you. With that, I'm out. Be sure to check out the 2% Solution podcast. And yeah, I'll see you on the flip side.